What's going on, YouTube? My name is Joel Rivera, and it's time to learn something new. All right, so on the previous video that we did, we took our original router on a stick lab and we expanded it to include a network connection through the EVNG's NAT cloud, and then we were able to get internet access. Now I want to expand on that and start using Linux servers instead of just the VPCS, the virtual PCs that EVNG provides, which are also similar to what GNS3 provides. So we want to actually use systems. So I'm going to only switch out the device here, VPC5, which is supposed to be on our logical management VLAN. Sorry, it's supposed to be on our out-of-band management VLAN. So I want to switch that one out because that's what we're going to use to SSH into our router, which is our second step, or what I really want to do, as a lab today, which is start a lab to SSH into the router. So we went from doing the router on a stick lab, we expanded the cloud connection, which allows us to have internet access, and now we're going to use a actual Linux operating system instead of the virtual PCs, right? So we'll set up first the SSH portion. We'll get it prepped, the router to take the SSH portion. I gotta first boot up our router and our system to make sure that all our configs are copacetic. But once we do that, then we'll move on through the lab. Okay, so if you're here, we're gonna set up the SSH on our router. We're gonna change out our management out-of-band management device, and then move on to adding a Linux system. Okay. All right. So let's start first by switching out the device. So I'm just gonna delete this one right here, and it was connected on Ethernet 02 on that switch. So we're gonna connect the device exactly on Ethernet 02, and I'll try to put it in the same position that it was so we don't confuse. So, okay, Linux server. Let me look for that penguin mascot. Linux. I know they have it here. I've used it before. Linux. Not Kali. Well, here. There it is. Okay. So we're going to add a Linux server using Ubuntu 18.04. It's going to have 2 CPUs, RAM. I don't think we need 4096. Let's do 2048. So that's good. Okay, and we'll console in using VNC. That's good. All right. Okay. Now that I created that object, like I said, I'm going to put it in the same position. I'm going to connect it to Ethernet 02 on the switch. So that's going to be the same. But we will need to update our logical map. So let's go to our logical map, pull that up, edit. It's not node 5, so I need to... Well, actually, it will still be node 5 Linux. Okay, so it updated and ended up using the same node. So we can actually keep it the same. We don't need to. Definitely, I'll try it before, obviously. So let's turn on all our systems. Like I said, we want to check to see that the configs did actually save. I believe I did. If not, then I'll just edit the video and do what I need to do to get the system back up um, to the state that it to the state of internet connectivity that we had before completing the video, and then we'll start off there. Let's let the system boot up. We can go to the logical map to make it a little bit easier on me. Okay, so R1, let's bring that up. Okay, first we're going to do, since we're in user exec mode, obviously to get into privileged exec mode, we're going to type enable, and we're going to do a show run, so to verify that we have, so IP name server, that's definitely a command that was added in the last lab, where we made Google's public DNS server the DNS for our system, for our network. Okay, so that is good. We should see Ethernet 01 with DHCP, and it should have IPNet outside, which it does. IPNet inside for 024, it does. All right. So that's good. All right, and we have the ACLs. Okay, so looks like the configs were saved, so we don't need to do any additional prep for that. So, okay, so now to start on the lab. Like I said, I wanted to do an SSH lab. SSH is essential nowadays. We don't telnet. We're telnetting in a lab environment, but in normal day-to-day working at a network enterprise, you're not going to be using telnet, okay? Because telnet sends the traffic in clear text, and we don't want to do that. So we use SSH when we have to console into our system, right? So we got to set that up, and that's one of the first things you'll do when you get a system. You'll set it up in preparation for SSH. So let's do that. There's a few things we'll need to do. First thing we're going to need to do is, obviously, if you're going to set up SSH on a Cisco router or a switch, you're going to need to add it to a domain. Well, actually, for edit this. Okay, so actually, the first thing you need is to make sure it has a name. We already did that because we configured the router to be R1. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second would be adding it to a domain. So since it's a lab environment, you know, we're not actually a company. Um, you know, so we don't actually own a domain, you know, for that. But if you were working for your enterprise network, there would be an established domain. If not, you'll be creating a domain. So, for example, joelrivera.com, which is my website. If I were to create a network and I wanted to, you know, have these systems under joelrivera.com, then my domain would probably be joelrivera.com, obviously, right? In this case, since this is a lab environment, we're going to create our own. So to do anything, remember, configuration wise, we need to get into global config mode. We're currently in privileged exec mode, but we need to go to global config mode. So we're going to type configure terminal. And then once we're in global config, we need to, as I said, assign it to a domain. So I'm going to do IP domain name. And let's go with mylab.local. Okay, so now my router belongs to the domain mylab.local. Okay, so the next thing that you need to do to get it, you know, to get it on SSH, to enable SSH on the router is we need to generate a key. So to generate a key, we're going to do crypto key, then generate, and then RSA. Okay, At this point, the router is saying um, it's asking us to provide the size of our crypto key. So my recommendation is nowadays is going to be 2048 or above. The higher you go, it takes a little bit longer to do, but it should do it rather quickly. We're running on a lab, a lab router. It's not a physical router. If it was on a physical router, it would take a little bit longer, but it should be rather quick. So I'm going to do 2048. Okay, so right now it's generating the key, and like I said, it's pretty quick. It was done in 3 seconds. So the next thing, though, nowadays SSH 1.99 is not good enough. Probably going to be required to in any places to set it to SSH version 2, and I believe to do that would be IP SSH version 2. Yeah. All right. So now we should be do show IP SSH. We should be in version 2. Okay. And I did a show command, and you'll see here. Okay, we have the RSA generated key. And SSH is enabled with version 2. Okay, so now we got to that part. We need to be able to access our router. So to access our router, we need to create a local login connection. So to do that, we're going to obviously need to create a username. So I'm going to create a user. To do that, it is username. Next, you would type the username. Let's do secret. And then, so secret is instead of typing password, we're going to type secret. If you do secret, it will encrypt the password instead of leaving it in clear text if you leave it with password. Okay, so we want it to be a little bit tougher, to be viewed. So we want it so that when you do the show running config, you'll see the username, and then the password would show a hash value, right? So that's what we want to do. We want it to show a hash value instead of the clear text. So I'm going to create a strong password, and I have one here. So we're going to say strong, capital P, password 1234. They'll never get it. Now this is actually a poor password. It's good password in the sense of I'm using capital letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols, but it's really not a good overall password because we're using the word password in it. So for the sake of the lab, to keep it pretty simple, I'm creating a strong password. I wouldn't recommend you use that obviously in a real world environment. You should follow always the policies set by, um, set by the company that you're working for, or what have you. If you're working on a government contract, then they will obviously have guidelines on what passwords to use and if you use a password manager or not. But for the sake of the lab, we're going to just create this simple password for me to remember, but a little bit more complicated than your normal just password. Okay, so that's the password I'm going to create. So I created my user that we're going to use to log in, and I set the password to strong password 1234. All right. So the next thing we want to do, obviously, is we want to enable password, right? Because we don't want it to just log in directly. As you notice, I didn't put privilege 15, which would allow me to access directly, but we're going to be a little bit more cautious, and we're going to create a enable password. So for the sake of the lab, I'm going to keep the enable password to Cisco in all lowercase. That's not a good password as well because it should be a little bit more complicated. But again, you'll follow the guidelines and stipulated in the policies um, given to you when you work at your company, right? Okay, so let's do a little summary of what we've done so far. So what we've done so far in this lab is we erased our original device that was connected here, and I created a Linux um, box. And after that, we set up SSH on our system, and we did that by first making sure that we have a host name on our router, which we do. We have R1 set. That the router belongs to a domain, which we did. We Our domain is mylab.local, and then we created the RSA token or key, RSA key, and that was generated on the system. We set SSH version 2, and we just now finished creating a username named admin with a strong password, and we have set the enable password to Cisco. So I want to do one other thing, which is, or we need to do one other thing, which is indicate that our line VTY connections are going to be using transport input SSH. And we want to make sure it's login local. All right. All right. So at this point, we're going to check a couple of things. First, let's check the enable password. So let's do a disable, and that will take us from privileged exec mode back into user exec mode. And to go back, obviously you would type enable. Voila, it's requiring a password, which the password should be Cisco. Okay, so our enable password is working. What about our username? So if I were to do exit, I should be logged out. No, I'm not. We'll have to do that check later. That's right. Okay. Once we do the SSH connection, we'll be able to check that. Okay, now that we've completed that SSH on the router portion of the lab, we're gonna now log into our Linux device. The default password for this system is test123 with the user set to user. All right, let this load up. Okay, so this is Ubuntu. Now we need to set up the IP address on it, and if we go back to our diagram, we need to remember to give it the same IP address. So it's going to be 192.168.10.129, and we need to make sure that the gateway is 158. Okay, because we're creating it on the management, the out of band management VLAN. So the system that we're creating is here, and I'm sorry, I can't seem to draw. Okay, so again, this is now a Linux device. Wow, I really cannot type. Okay, this is now a Linux Ubuntu server. All right. we're going to make sure we have the right IP address. So to set the IP address, first let's see what IP address it has and what devices, what NIC. So the NIC that we need to assign the IP address is ENS3. Okay, so to assign a IP address, we're just going to do sudo IP address or IP ADDR space. And then we're going to type out the IP address, which is 192.168.10.161. No, 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 no. 129. Right? Yes. 129. And it is a /27. Right? Yeah, /27. And again, the device we're going to use, our NIC that we're going to use is the ENS3. So I typed first IP ADR to determine what NIC is established on our system. It is ENS3 on this server. So you type sudo, which is the run the command in root, IP ADDR, and then the IP address with the Saturn notation of 27 because the subnet mask is 255.255.254. And then we indicated the device we're going to use to assign that IP address is ENS3. Okay, so that should work. It's going to require that I enter the password. Funny they didn't take that. What did I do wrong? I think I messed up. Well, I thought that's how you do it. IP address. Add, change, replace. Okay, let's do it again. Sudo IP ADR. Let's type out IP address. Sudo IP address. Do a question mark. Nope. 192.168.10.129. /27. Device is ENS3. Unknown. Is it add? That's it. I forgot to add. Sudo IP address add the IP address with the /27, which is the Saturn notation, DEV, which is the device, and then we're telling it ENS3, which is the NIC identified by the server. Okay. It's good that we do mistakes every once in a while because you learn by doing it. Okay, so I forgot to add the command add because we're adding the IP address. Okay, so the next command that we'll need to do is set the default gateway. So we already have the IP address and we have the subnet mask, but we need to tell it the gateway in case we need to access outside the network, right? So to do that, sudo IP route add default via. So this is basically saying run this command as root with the sudo command. Type, add a default route by doing IP route add default via, and this is where we're going to put the gateway's IP address, which is 192.168.10. Dot the last available IP address. Oh, it's right here. Dot 158. Dot 158. Right. All right. So if all went well, I should be able to ping the gateway at least. So I'm going to try to do that. So ping 192.168.10. No. Dot 158. There. Okay. So we can ping. So we are getting from our Linux machine to our router via ping. But this lab was to test SSH. So to do SSH from the Ubuntu server, we're going to do SSH. We're going to type the user that we need to connect to, the @ and then the IP address of our router, which should be our gateway, right? So 192.168.10.158. It's asking me to confirm that we're going to use an RSA key, and we're going to type yes to do that. And it shouldn't ask you again after you've done that one time. Now we need to put in that strong password, which was $strong, capital P, at $word 1 2 3 4. And as you can see, we're in the router, so it's requiring me, since I'm in privileged exec mode, to go into user exec mode. We gotta type enable. Sorry, to get into privileged exec mode, we gotta type enable, and then it's gonna require that enable password. So voila, we just successfully added a Linux device. We assigned an IP address, and we also set up SSH on our router, and we confirmed for this system that we added to the network that it is able to get to the router via SSH. So, job well done. All right. Your task, if you choose to accept it, will be to complete the servers and just one of these devices. So I'll do that outside of the lab, but to make sure that on our next step that we do have that. All right, and I think that we're basically done for this video. So please hit that like button down below. Make sure you subscribe. Please comment any issue or gripes that you may have, or if you like the video, comment what you like the video. Comment helps us help this channel grow. Again, I'm learning and trying to get back into YouTube, and that's one way to grow, is having you guys like the video, watch it in its entirety, and also comment down below. So you would do me a big favor if you did that. And if you didn't like it, please also as well. It's fine. You can hit dislike, but if you do that, at least comment down below on what I can do to fix my video or fix my future videos. But anyways, thank you for watching this video. Okay, until next time, bye.